I want to thank all of you for spending today with us at the Spot Museum. Pretty exciting. Let's take a quick minute and do quick introductions of the panelists. So, Mike, you want to kick off?
Sure, not a problem. Mike Witt, CISO of NASA. Prior to coming to NASA, I spent a couple of tours at DHS, specifically at US CERT. I have been working with Mr. Jerry Dixon there during his government days, and was also at the Internal Revenue Service running their Security Operations Center, and DoD for a number of years at Department of Defense Computer Emergency Response Team.
Max?
I'm Max Everett. I'm the CIO at the Department of Energy. I've been there a couple of years. Before that, I've been around federal, both inside government as a contractor, so Commerce, DHS, White House, everywhere you can think of. So,
Great. Jerry?
Jerry Dixon, so CISO for CrowdStrike. Mike alluded to spent quite a bit of time in government as well. Everybody's favorite agency as well, IRS, and then of course US CERT at Homeland Security.
Great. Thank you. Let's go ahead and kick this off here. So, again, we're going to be focusing primarily on adoption of cloud and the protection of data in the cloud. So, kicking this off, what are some of the biggest challenges your organization has faced as it relates to cloud adoption? And how are you working to move past those kind of obstacles, if you will? Want to kick that one off?
I'll kick it off. Right. So at NASA, adoption of the cloud is not a problem. I think the challenge that we have from the security side is trying to keep up with the pace of the adoption of wanting to move aggressively to the cloud. So it's just thank you very much. It's just trying to keep up with the pace. That's probably our biggest challenge.
Right. Now you actually were way ahead of the curve in terms of adopting cloud, and especially as it relates to ingesting massive amounts of data direct to cloud versus direct to on-prem and then moving it. So you kind of were in a unique situation there and had to kind of tread some new ground with DHS, didn't you?
Yes. So we had a particular program around our earth science data. So if you think about data, a lot of times we just call it science, coming down from a lot of our satellite technologies up above the earth. The volume of that data coming down did not really work with the, I'll call it the legacy setup of the way that the government runs the trusted internet connections. So we basically worked with Homeland Security and OMB to push forward what is now being worked on as the Trusted Internet Connection 3.0 for cloud and enhancements going forward. But what we've done is we've basically taken the, accepted the risk, if you will, because it's low data coming from our satellites, and we're taking that straight into the cloud, bringing it down to our ground, satellite ground stations, and then we ingest that directly right into the clouds so that we can serve that up to our customers in a very timely manner from that standpoint.
Great. Max?
well, I think ours, I would say two. One is related to kind of what you said, which is, as you look at things, and our department's got a real variety. We've got everything from nuclear secrets down to open science and everything in between. And so I think part of that, as you look across the department, not just to headquarters, but our national labs and things, has been trying to move from a compliance to actual risk management, right? So it's not going to be one size fits all. It has to be risk-based, and moving to a model where everybody involved in the process is thinking that way. I think that's certainly been a challenge, and one we're still working on. We've started to make some changes with departmental cybersecurity program and different things to do that. The other one I think is common to almost anybody, which is culture. We simply didn't have the history or the experience of putting things in cloud, right? Which means people were, they don't have that skill set. They're not incentivized to do it. It's just not the mindset for people, and so that has been a pretty big lift right now, pushing people towards that very different mindset of what it takes to go to cloud.
Right. Jerry, given that CrowdStrike is very much a cloud native, almost born in the cloud kind of company, what are some unique perspectives that you might have as it relates to adoption of cloud and security of cloud?
Yeah, so good point. So I mean, we do tend to lead pretty far forward on using cloud services. So our business moves pretty quickly, and so there's a lot of applications that enable teams to basically get set up instantly and get up and running. So we tools like Salesforce or other type cloud applications, as well as file storage. So from a security perspective, a lot of organizations, and I know, from my times in government as well as in other organizations, just even simple things around asset management. Well, on the cloud side, it's a lot easier to keep track of your assets because you're getting billed for them, right? So you get that monthly bill. You actually see what's hosted there. It's a chance to really erase some of the security or technical debt that you might have across your organization by kind of starting fresh in a cloud type environment, whether you're taking advantage of hosting services, AWS, GCP, or Azure, as well as a lot of the applications. And the other big benefit that we certainly take advantage of is the ability to scale up or scale down as needed. So there's a lot of great benefits from a cloud perspective.
So you actually scale down. Most people scale up and they forget they can do the scale down part. So it's good to hear that you're actually taking advantage of that piece.
Yeah, like I said, when you get that monthly bill, you're always looking at, what services that you really need, looking at run the business cost. So, that's something that we keep a close tabs on.
Right. So, Max, you mentioned culture a minute ago, and this is always going back to embracing internet, virtualization. Here we are, cloud now. Even client server back in the day. What are some of the things that your agencies are doing as it relates to kind of changing that culture? How to think differently about the technology, think about the platforms, and maybe focusing more on the constituent service side. What are some of the cultural barriers and cultural programs you're trying to push forward to change that?
Well, I think when you look at culture, we all want to make a great culture. We talk about it, but culture is really ultimately driven by incentives.
Right.
Right, positive and negative incentives. The positive ones are rewarding people, holding people out, praising them, giving them promotions, doing those things, training, all those things. Those are sort of the positive incentives. And then there's the negative incentives, right? So every time you let somebody keep something, keep an old piece of iron on prim, you've created a negative incentive. Every time you let somebody go do, the same thing they've always done without at least doing, cloud's not perfect for everything, but if you haven't even made people do the business case, if you haven't even made them add up their costs and show you, hey, how much does it cost you soup to nuts to run something on-prem versus the cloud? If you haven't gone through that, you made a negative incentive because now they know, well, they can just get away with doing what they've always done. And those are really the things that actually, we can all say things and we can put up a nice poster on the wall, but those incentives are actually what creates the culture and sets the expectation for people of where you're going.
Yeah, I think it's kind of what Max has kind of alluded to there. I mean, some of the challenges around culture that we've had is, I'm going to call it not so much from a lot of our user base wanting to go to the cloud. Again, it's probably from the security side to keep up with that. So I know that me and my deputy, we actually kind of cut the country in half, and we went out to all of the NASA centers and basically had town halls to let them know, why we were having to do some of the changes around security so that things would be a little different of what their expectation was. But it was to really get there so they would understand that we're trying to help them do things better from that standpoint. The other challenge that I probably have seen is, I'm going to call it even amongst my own team. Just this week, my team that runs my security infrastructure approached me with options, and option number 3 was take our stuff to the cloud, and actually that was the one I chose. So we're actually going to start moving a lot of our security infrastructure into the cloud over the next year.
Great. So going back to the security side now, is obviously it's all about the data. It's all about and both of your agencies are actually very data intensive as well. What are some of the best practices that you have, or recommended practices you've developed or inherited or adopted to really kind of ensure that data is used appropriately and is secured, and it's still usable as well? What's that?
Well, I'll jump in, and again, and cloud is one of those drivers, but I think most of us understand that there's other drivers that are pushing us towards sort of a data-centric view, right? And so if you look at mobility, the expectation that we're going to have a lot more diverse endpoints that people want to consume and work with data. If you look at the thoughts around sort of zero trust, that with that expansion and with the cloud, our data is going to be going across networks that are not secure, right? And of course, most of us probably think our own networks are maybe a little more secure than they actually are. And so if you look at all those models and drivers, that's pushing us towards that protection of data, right? It's not that we're not going to protect the endpoints. It's not that we're not going to stop doing perimeter protection, but protecting that data and giving it sort of the velocity that can go where it needs to go. That's a big part of it. So we're doing a couple things I think are pretty common. We have a chief data officer. We've started to actually make a data strategy, right? And our labs are creating untold amounts of data that has huge value for the country, for taxpayers and stakeholders. And so the first question, of course, is where is all your data, right? If you know where it is, you can't protect it. And then you got to know what is actually the most valuable, not only to protect, but what's the most valuable data to actually get out to stakeholders. And so we're on the front edges of that, but that's a big one we're having to work through because there's not a lot of great models out there right now.
Right.
When we talk about protecting data, I think we said, it's not just, well, hey, that's great, you encrypt it, but it's got to be usable.
Right.
It's got to be usable encryption that an end user can use it, and then it's protected that whole way. That's a little more challenging than it sounds, and doing it in a user-friendly manner.
Mm-hmm. Well, especially if you look at the increasing adoption of neural network technologies or robotic process automation. I know both of your agencies are actually at the forefront of adopting a lot of these technologies, or I should say, been using a number of these technologies for many years and are only accelerating that. The access to that data is going to be more critical, and also looking at, okay, how are we going to make sure that only the right people are getting to the right data at the right time becomes even more of a challenge, I think. But I'm glad to hear that you guys have brought on a CDO and started to develop the policies about managing that data. Jerry, you say something?
Yeah, so, key point around protecting the data, right? So, there's a lot of tools, like in our case, we're big users of Slack or Box. We actually hold the encryption keys so that nobody at those firms can actually view our data. Only CrowdStrike folks can take a view of that data. Very seamless capabilities. A lot of the providers out there enable you to encrypt it at rest or in transit. And so, I encourage folks to take advantage of those things. Another key area is your authentication scheme. So using things like SAML, like Okta to, also provide access to those services and also kind of get the logs, right?
Yep.
For who's authenticating, where they're authenticating from, all the things that your security operations team will need to have a view into. The other piece is really take a look at cloud access security brokers, or CASB. So, back to your zero trust conversation, that's something that every organization needs to take a hard look at and leverage those capabilities to further protect those applications that you're hosting out in the cloud.
Yeah, a lot of it that Jerry and Max just kind of touched on is a lot of things that we're doing around that standpoint, especially around authentication from that. Some of the challenges that we've kind of ran into is, around OAuth, right? There's a lot of type of technologies out there being used in the cloud environments and stuff like that, but some of the standards aren't necessarily there. From your token timeouts, we have requirements in the federal government that we have to go by from a NIST standards, but not every cloud provider has the same, if you will, standards that they use. You have one provider that has a token timeout of 1 hour. You've got another well-known provider that does 90 days. The token's good for 90 days. So we've had to basically get kind of in the middle of that from an authentication standpoint of how we manage those timeouts ourselves, and we take kind of control of that is what we've kind of done going forward.
I think another layer that's probably worth taking a look at is the API layer, and that is, managing on-prem, we're not used to necessarily tracking APIs. It's not something that we probably have a whole lot of that we're dealing with, but when you're dealing with these IaaS players out there, these cloud players, there's a whole other layer of management and manipulation that we don't see from our traditional tool sets, and that is the API layer. So we can actually have people logging into consoles, but if they're using SDKs, if they're using command line, they're actually interacting with APIs, which means the cloud providers are actually providing all that log data in a completely different method than what we're traditionally used to. So being able to manipulate and pull that down and analyze that, it's a layer I think that some people are still it's kind of opaque to them. So being able to make sure that you're capturing those logs that are available from your cloud, A, turning them on, because they may not be on by default, but then B, actually pulling them down and capturing them and analyzing them as part of your standard forensics. Again, it goes back to the speed. If someone is actually accessing your infrastructure player from an API perspective, and you're not capturing and monitoring those API logs, you're not going to catch it in a minute or less. You're just not going to be able to do that. So that's just something else that I've run into over the last couple of years as well. The next question I've got here is, going back to the modernization component, modernization aspect is, what are some of the major steps and important changes your organizations have made over the last year around modernization, about digital modernization? And kind of the corollary of that, again, what again are the challenges and lessons learned from that experience? So looking at the modernization aspect of things. So take that one.
Yeah, I can take that one. So from a NASA standpoint, probably one of the big recent modernizations that we did there was we, over the past year, went from on-prem email to cloud-based email and file storage from that standpoint. We've also went with file storage in the cloud, but only available to internal users because we're putting very sensitive high data into that, and we had to work with the cloud providers to make sure that we could handle, they could handle our data at the high level. But again, we have that where it's only available to our internal users around that. So we had a lot of challenges kind of, as we worked through some of this, going to the, migrating from on-prem to the cloud and the email. To be honest with you, I thought it was going to be a little bit more plug and play than what it was. It's big providers out there kind of do this routinely now, and we found some things along the way that we had to work with the provider with to kind of help shore up and stuff like that. But again, it's a trust relationship that you have to have with these cloud providers. They're in it with you. I mean, you're using their computer systems, right? So there's some level of trust that you have to have with that provider going forward. So make sure you choose wisely.
Great.
Well, again, on the cloud piece, when I walked in the department, at headquarters, we were already using cloud email. And some of our labs were, but if you looked across the entire complex, less than half of, our total seat count was using cloud email. Okay. So and that's one of the reasons. So we went and got some money from the Technology Modernization Fund, specifically with the goal of pushing everybody towards migrating to cloud email, which is going to help us because we're very federated across our labs and other things. That was just going to give us a lot more opportunity, one, to be a little more collaborative because we're very federated. The second one, frankly, was that it was starting to push people towards, I don't think cloud doesn't necessarily save you dollars day one for a lot of different reasons. The flip side, as I mentioned, was you still got to do your business case. And, that's part of what doing the TMF was about, was building the business case. Because we moved the headquarters, we knew what those costs were, right? As somebody, when they used to let me touch a keyboard, I actually used to administer Exchange servers. I know all the costs of that, right? And so we could go back to people and say, well, show me your cost per mailbox. And having done that at enterprise scale, it's expensive, right? Doing those things on-prem, all the third-party licensing for all the little things you need, it's expensive. And trying to make sure that people are actually counting their costs apples to apples, I think that's a big part of that. And to me, then, the other thing, when we talk about modernization, modernization is not about the technology. And what I mean by that is you can put all new technology in today, and in 2 or 3 years, it's broken again, right? It's out of date. You have new customer requirements, whatever. And so the modernization is not the tech, because tech's never really the problem in tech. The people are always the problem in the tech. And so our focus has been things like, TMF and other routes to force people to start thinking about business cases, to start thinking about life cycle management. Those are actually what drive modernization, right? Getting the next new whiz-bang shiny thing, that's not modernizing. That's just a new thing that you have to deal with and manage. The modernization is actually how we manage all of those things. And we're not anywhere near perfect, but we've made some good progress on trying to get our arms around that better and make sure that people are managing it the way they should, which is understand your costs, understand your customers, right? I've joked, except it's not a joke, most of us have been around government. I've seen lots of projects that were delivered on time and on schedule that were absolutely worthless because they were not delivering any value to the end customer. They probably never even talked to the end customer, and the end customer never used them, or in certain cases, they'll use 2 systems. They'll keep using the old system, and then when you force them to dump something in the new one, they'll do it grudgingly. And that's just as bad as if you're over budget or behind schedule. In fact, it's probably worse because it lets you have the pretense that you've done your job well. And so we're trying to find ways to really manage that as well.
So I know that the DOE was an early adopter of the Modernizing Government Technology Act. And as you mentioned, the Technology Modernization Fund. Where have you had some good successes leveraging that program? Has that been a good program for you? Has it been?
Yeah, and I'll tell you, we've been actually very slow to spend the money from it. Okay. But this goes back to what we kind of said at the beginning. It was the culture change, right? A little like you said with the town. It was a signal to people that, one, not only was it okay, it was encouraged to move to cloud email. So I've had some of our labs, they didn't need to wait for the money it was simply the signal that this is where we should go, that we're in support of it. And so some of them jumped way ahead of us and they've already done the migrations on their own because money wasn't the issue.
Right.
So there, frankly, for us, TMF, there was just a huge cultural value to send that signal to people. So we've already gotten value out of that. And as we've done some contract things, we got a couple of our larger groups of people that are lined up this year to get moved over. But yeah, again, that was a culture signal, right? That was an incentive signal to people that this is a way to go. And we've gotten a lot of value out of that.
Right. Jared, anything?
Well, since Mike touched on trust a little bit about using cloud services, I think, being a provider, right, and, again, being cloud-based, some of the things that you need to do or consider is make sure that you've got, when you're looking at a vendor, that they have a SOC 2, that they've had an independent security assessment. There's a lot of security tools out there that will actually do ongoing continuous monitoring of the different providers. It'll kind of show you the maturity of their program, assigns them a grade across a wide range of areas. It'll send alerts if the score goes up or down, and it helps your third-party risk management practice kind of keep tabs on things. There's a lot of ways to stay on top of things. A big one, for protecting organizations, make sure that they have a bug bounty program. We run a bug bounty program. We've got a private one that tests our products and different features and capabilities, and then we have a public one that security researchers can use to get a hold of us. And it's a force multiplier in ensuring that the provider, you already have a vulnerability management team and internal red team, but using security researchers, and sometimes you'll get over 200 plus researchers attacking your infrastructure trying to find potential security issues, and that enables the vendors to quickly fix or remediate those. And so when you're evaluating providers, take a comprehensive look, engage with the security team. I know we often get caught up in the 200, 300 question security questionnaires that often go back and forth between customers and vendors, and that's helpful and it helps you kind of zero in on some areas, but I think the first step is really having a good conversation with the security team of whichever vendor you're looking at. Mm-hmm. So just some tips to think about and some areas to explore when you're thinking about the issues of trust and are these people going to actually protect my data.
I think the days of trust would verify are over. I think it's just verify and verify again is pretty much the new mantra that I keep hearing. So speaking of security and trust, FedRAMP. So I still hear people saying things like, well, I moved my application to the cloud, so the cloud provider's taking care of all that stuff because they have FedRAMP. What's the reality of how that should play out? I know, Mike, you probably have some thoughts on this.
You're good, you're just good.
You're just good.
No.
Cloud provider takes care of all of it. Yeah.
No, FedRAMP is really just kind of bringing in a minimum baseline, and each agency has to look at what other controls that they need to put on that, because again, you may be using a particular service, if you will, whether it's a SaaS or if you're going to do file storage or whatever, but it gets back into what's the level of that data. If you're going to be, as I mentioned earlier, if you're going to be putting high data into a cloud provider, your controls are going to be a lot more than that FedRAMP baseline that comes out around that and stuff. So it's really just kind of looking at that. You have to understand what your, and I'll call it FIPS 199, right? And that's just in our NIST world. You've got to understand what controls you need to put in place, because it really gets around to what's the data driving that. Do you need confidentiality? Do you need the integrity? Do you need the availability around that? All of those controls drive what you have to put on top of the FedRAMP package.
Well, maybe go beyond that in terms of there may be other compliance regimes that you may have to fall under as well. So I know NASA, you fall under the International Traffic in Arms Regulation as it relates to satellites and satellite data. So I'm guessing that you've got to balance that as well.
Absolutely, and for the ITAR, EAR data that we deal with and everything, we have actually very specific controls that go around that. Those actually apply for that.
And you layer those on top.
We layer those all on top of that. We kind of have to, for our levels of data and types, we've worked with some of our various missions to have overlays, if you will, to make things go a little bit faster, so that we don't have to go through all, I'll call it 1,000 controls of 853 to do the evaluations. It really just gets back to the ones that we really need to kind of focus on, or have our, if you will, our customer and system owners focus on those specific controls.
Okay, great. I know, Jerry, you just went through this. You guys have achieved your FedRAMP certifications. Provisional or agency?
We've got it. So,
Is it provisional or an agency ATO?
Agency, we get a
Okay, cool.
ATO.
Okay.
Yeah.
So tell me some thoughts on terms of going through that and adoption by.
It was easy, right?
The agency, right? Yeah.
It actually was a pretty heavy lift for our organization, right? So, we actually created, getting into our GovCloud environment, we had to kind of re-engineer how we did business from a product perspective. But, I'm in the middle of our assessment, for year 2, right? So we're being audited right now. But, I think once we got there, it actually helped us drive a lot of organizational change as well, just because of the security controls, the type of benchmarks that we had to meet across the environment, and able to help drive further change in other parts of the organization, just going through that process. I think, initially, as all of y'all know, anytime you roll out a new project, there's a lot of, some gnashing of the teeth, so to speak. And so, once you get past that, probably within the second or third week, once we got into the phase, hey, we're going to go do this, ended up not being as painful as folks thought it was going to be to get there. So, now our big thing, of course, is, keeping up with the standards and the controls and some of the new guidelines that just came out as well. So it's keeping us busy.
Yep. Max?
Well, I'd say when you get around cloud, and so in my life before energy, when I had cybersecurity, we talked to clients about this, or my leadership now asks about it, right? Is it safe? And sort of the mythology that on both sides, right? Some people, to your point, think, oh, well, I'm in the cloud, they've got me covered. And of course, that's not remotely true. The flip side is, oh, cloud's inherently more dangerous or this or that. And that's not true. And I think part of it is talking in the vernacular of risk. Cloud is not more or less risk, it is different risk. And I think that's, for me, talking to leadership, I think that's been critical. A couple of folks that I worked with a couple of clients right before I came into energy, where we did incident response, both of them were issues where data had been put up in the cloud. There was no, the access control and the change control were not really done well. And the result was that they had data that shouldn't have been exposed in the cloud, right? And I think when we look around, that's probably the most common scenario for what we call sort of cloud breaches, right? And a lot of my focus on cloud, and I appreciate when you talk about CASB and some of those tools, is that to me is the focus area for a lot of cloud is, you're right, like, hey, great, you got FedRAMP, congratulations, but do you have access controls? Are they audited? Are they monitored? Do you have change control in place so that no one accidentally hits something and puts a patch and flips everything from closed to open and that kind of thing? Those are really the questions you have to ask in cloud. Yes, can there be more risk because you can't hide your mistakes behind a firewall? Yeah. You are getting some other help in a lot of different areas in cloud, but there are just those different risks. And I think it's just important to couch it that way. And that's what I've been trying to do. And again, I think our leadership and our technical leadership have really started to understand that. So that's where we're trying to move forward.
I think, just to piggyback on that, a lot of the vendors and the cloud providers, or even the application providers in the cloud, they have dedicated security teams. They have product security teams. They have their information security organization. And then you've got your own internal security team. You've got, essentially, you expanded your security capability across the organization. This is why contracts, when you're building and signing off for these vendors, make sure you've got those reporting guidelines, whether it's related to incidents or vulnerability information. But at the end of the day, you've got a lot more eyeballs looking at protecting that data. Obviously, the providers are incentivized to protect that information, whether it's, basically to keep the business going, but also in your contractual obligations or regulatory type issues. But again, that's also yet another force multiplier is leveraging and expanding your security team by partnering with these different providers.
Great. All right, got a minute left, lightning round, all right? You're sending out your extra large tweet. What's the one thing you want people to walk away from today about cloud security?
I'm actually going to quote Dimitri from earlier, and that was a great quote he had, and that is, status quo isn't working. Don't be afraid to go to the cloud.
I mean, I would go with something along with that of just, that it's manage your risks, right? Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid and manage your risks, and you can get a lot of value out of those moves to the cloud and other newer services.
Great. Sure.
Speed and visibility. I mean, those are the two big ones for me. The ability to quickly roll out applications or services, and then also you gain that visibility across your infrastructure, so you reduce that a lot of the technical and security debt.
Yep. Mine's trust, but don't verify. Wait a minute, no, the other way around. It's verify, but don't trust anybody. There we go. All right, well, I want to thank all of you today. And again, thank the audience for being here today. And special thanks to Mike and Max and Jerry for being on the panel here. So thank you all.
Appreciate it. Thank you.